Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about WWF Super WrestleMania on the SNES. This was the first game in sort of LJN's trilogy of SNES games, and you can see the direction that the other ones were going to go in, and it's kind of sad that they just kept the exact same formula. This one is pretty bare bones. There's not really a whole lot to it. And it uses the exact same tug-of-war grapple system where your characters lock up and you just mash one of the buttons in order to do one of the few wrestling moves that are in the game. And then you have a bunch of punches and kicks, and you can do some diving attacks off the top rope. There are no special moves or signature moves in this, which means every character is going to play the exact same. Yeah, that's kind of it. One thing that they changed or hadn't implemented yet was that really stupid gauge when you grapple or when you lock up or whatever. That thing I thought was just pointless because it never really made any sense, and you could just watch your character's animation to see if you were winning or not. So that's not here, and I think that's a good thing. The difficulty setting is also simplified to easy, medium, and hard, which makes a whole hell of a lot more sense than having it from 1 to 10, which still confuses the hell out of me, and I still don't understand that one very well. There are only a few game modes in this. You can do a one-on-one match, a tag team match, or a Survivor Series match, which brings up the same question of why this was called WrestleMania when it could have just been called SummerSlam or Survivor Series or really anything. I guess Survivor Series would make more sense if there is a Survivor Series match in here, but whatever. So, yeah, the one-on-one matches are pretty straightforward. You basically win by pinfall because there are no submission moves in here. You can get lucky enough to win by countout, but why? The tag team matches are the exact same. It's just 2-on-2, and it's pretty easy to tag in and out your partner, which is great. And then the Survivor Series matches are 4-on-4, and those are elimination matches, so you have to pin each of the 4 opponents. Sometimes the opponents will come into the ring to stop you. Sometimes they won't break up the pinfalls. It's kind of strange when that happens because you pin your opponent and the other guy just kind of stands on the apron and watches, which is kind of stupid, but at least it works the same way when you're getting pinned and people just sort of watch. So yeah, it's a little weird, but it's sort of forgivable because it's on the Super Nintendo and it's not one of the more modern systems. By playing these games out of order, it is kind of interesting to see just how they didn't actually innovate that much on their game design. They found their grapple system and they were just like, yep, this is what we're going to do, and forget it. We're not going to make any changes. We're not going to make any of the wrestlers feel unique or anything like that. This is what we're going to go with. And that worked for LJN's publishing deal. So yeah, I guess that's fun. In many ways, this one does feel a little bit like a disappointment because I was expecting a game on the Super Nintendo to do more than what this one does. If you look at some of the games on the NES, you had more going on there. You had characters that could do more moves. You had moves that were done out of a grapple, so just walk up to the person and do a move. There was just more going on in many of the NES games, many of the licensed NES games, than there was with these 3 LJN games. So it is kind of sad to see this and just see how little was actually done with it. In many ways, Super WrestleMania feels an awful lot like WrestleMania the arcade game, where it looks nice, the gameplay is there, but there just isn't much to really sink your teeth into. While Super WrestleMania does give more game modes, it still has kind of the same boring gameplay as the arcade game does. The graphics in this game are okay. It isn't as flashy as the arcade game because it's not using digitized sprites or anything like that. And every character is pretty well detailed. I will say this, at least they didn't use the same character model like in the other LJN games, or at least it doesn't look like it. The characters all have a distinct look to them. They don't look like just graphical swaps of the same character, which somehow became the norm for the other two LJN games. It is nice to see that Typhoon and Earthquake look different than Hulk Hogan, or The Undertaker looks different from Sid Vicious, or, Randy Savage looks smaller than some of the other characters. It just makes sense when you look at the game and you look at the stats and the manual and everything. I get what they're doing, and it makes a whole lot more sense than the other two LJN games. I would say this one doesn't look as good as the other two LJN games, and this one looks similar to WCW Super Brawl. And in some ways, it plays similar to that too, as your characters are more sluggish. The hit detection isn't always great. Yeah, it still isn't a good game, but visually it looks better than the NES games, which is what you would expect from a Super Nintendo game. Overall, this isn't the best looking wrestling game on the SNES, but it is a very good looking one. The character sprites are well detailed, you can tell who everyone is, and the developers use different models, which is great. The animations on the moves look a little stiff, and the characters' movement is sort of sluggish, like they're moving through quicksand or moving through a foot of mud or something like that. That's the only real knock that I have on this. It's a playable game, but it isn't anything that would really push this game above being mediocre at best. There are only 10 wrestlers in this game, which I think is okay for the first Super Nintendo game that LJN published. The rosters don't get that much bigger than this, so yeah, it's kind of expected at this point. The wrestlers in this game are Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan, Typhoon, Earthquake, The Undertaker, Hawk, Animal, Ted DiBiase, Jake the Snake, and Sid Justice. There is a difference between the Super Nintendo version and the Sega Genesis version when it comes to the roster, and yeah, I'll talk about that once I get to the Genesis game. However, I saw something that said Bret Hart and Rick Martel are in the Super Nintendo version, and this just isn't true, unless they're unlockable characters, which I don't think so. Like, I haven't seen anything that would indicate that there were unlockable characters in this. So, I think whoever wrote that was thinking of one of the other LJN games, or maybe I looked up information on a different one. I don't think so, but just the fact that there are 3 LJN games all on the WWF at this time, maybe someone got confused when they were writing this stuff down. It is fun to look at these rosters and just see who could have been on this, or who could have been in this game, and just think about who you would have dropped. I would have kept Bam Bam Bigelow in here and gotten rid of somebody, but I think Bret Hart definitely should have been in this game as well. And yeah, it's weird to see just the list of characters and, just sort of guess why somebody was left out or why someone was just not included in the game. So I wanted to look up the manual and just see if I was missing anything, especially after I saw that Rick Martel and Bret Hart were supposed to be in the game. The manual doesn't indicate that at all, so yeah, I was pretty sure was a load of crap. But yeah, the manual doesn't really give you any insight into how to play the game. Once you've this would have been the first LJN game, so it does a good job of explaining the horrible grapple system that they're saddling this game with, but I don't think it really needed that. It's just a button masher, so yeah, whatever. It is cool that they include all the wrestlers and little bios for them, just in case you didn't know anything about the characters before you picked this up. Overall, the manual didn't really shed any light on anything. There's no story mode going into this, and that's kind of sad, and the fact that there's no tournament mode either, so you can't even do a tournament for one of the championships that doesn't exist in this game. So it's kind of disappointing. Okay, let's wrap this one up. Super WrestleMania looks pretty good. It has decent controls, but it's still a little bit stiff, and the fact that every character is the exact same is very disappointing. There's also just a lack of content in this game. There are only 3 game modes. The roster isn't amazing, but it is good enough, I guess, to, create a game out of. And yeah, it's disappointing that each character kind of plays the same, but that does kind of put everybody on the same playing field, so it creates its own kind of difficulty system if you're playing against people. So I played these out of order, which might have affected how I viewed them. The Super WrestleMania was the first one, and the graphics I think are okay, but I do like that they actually gave the characters distinct looks, and they're not based on the same model like they would be in the next two LJN games. If I had played these in order, I might have reacted a little bit differently. If I had some nostalgia for them, I also might have reacted a bit differently to them. Unfortunately, I don't, because I really can't remember playing these games in the same way that I played the NES ones or the PlayStation games. I think these are a step up from LJN's games on the NES, but they're still just not all that great. And the tug-of-war system is awful, and I have no idea why they kept with it. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.